I'll be looking up a little bit on my screen to read some stuff.
And we are
timer too,
live.
I don't want to blather.
We're live now.
All right, I guess we are live here at the Smart Elections Forum. My name is Lynn Bernstein, and I'm hosting for Lulu this week. And Bennie Smith is my co-host. And let me give you a visual description of myself. I am a middle-aged Italian-American woman who I'm wearing a light blue shirt, and I have a white dogwood flower necklace on to represent my state of North Carolina where I live. And let me give you a little background about myself. I have a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering, and I worked for many years integrating and testing spacecraft. And so I ended up getting into election testing and things like that. I founded Transparent Elections North Carolina, and we are a volunteer group, and we're devoted to ensuring that North Carolina elections are worthy of the public's trust. And I think that in order for an election to be successful, the public has to have confidence in it. And that means that elections need to be secure, transparent, robustly audited, and publicly verified. And Bennie, go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right, I'm Bennie Smith, and I'm a technical advisor for Smart Elections, and I'm currently not an election commissioner, but I will be one in a few days. No longer the Shelby County Election Commission, and I've been elevated to the State Election Commission. So now I'm serving as a State Election Commissioner, and I am a Black male with a streak of gray and from stress down the low haircut. Gray, I'm starting to pepper out. I am sitting in front of a myriad of computer screens, and I have a dark blue and light blue polka dot shirt on.
Excellent. And it looks like we have some people who are joining. If you could, in the comments in the chat, we'd love to hear from you. And
shout out to City.
Yeah, tell us where you're from.
John Breaker from Tucson, Arizona. Transparent, trackable, and publicly verified John Breaker. Yep. John Bamboo Breaker. He's got a lot of names. Hey, John. We got Chris Alexander from Sonoma County, California. Bruce Korb, Santa Cruz, California. West Coast is running today.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, Kansas City.
Yeah.
Jessica Everhart.
Wonderful.
Hey, Jessica.
Welcome.
Mark Shaw, evening all. Niagara Falls. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. New York. Wow, we got people in.
Let's see if we got any. Come on, North Carolina. Any North Carolina people here on the call, or Tennessee?
You didn't give out no free.
No, we're shy. Maybe we're shy here. Southern shy. Well, we do have an awesome show tonight. So
yes,
what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of learning, and then we're going to do some lively discussion and hear some stories from the inside, since Bennie is an election commissioner and has administered many elections. He has a lot of an interesting view that a lot of us who are observers don't have. And so we're going to go over what does it mean to certify an election. I have 6 or 7 slides, and by the end of that, you're going to understand the difference between a canvass and an audit and what certification means. And we're going to talk about why there's a big controversy around certification now. So what is an election certification, and what's all the controversy about? So what does it mean to certify an election? Election certification, and I got this, most of this information comes from the EAC website, the Election Assistance Commission. And they have a lot of information and best practices for just about everything election related. And so I would highly encourage people after this show to really go through the EAC website and look and see if your state is measuring up and your county is measuring up to those best practices. They may be following all the laws, and maybe those laws don't include those best practices. And so I'm hoping that it's not going to be sort of a bystander effect where everyone assumes that somebody else is talking to their legislators about things. I'd like everyone who's watching now to really be serious about helping improving elections in your state. So the EAC defines election certification as the process of election officials attesting that the tabulation and canvassing of the election are complete and accurate, and that the election results are true and accurate accounting of all votes cast in a particular election. And so on election night, most voters, their job stops there. They go vote and they go home and they watch the election results. And those election results on election night are unofficial results. And then election officials conduct a canvass, which is a process. And then they do an audit. And sometimes those audits are before or after the certification. So let's jump into what a canvass is. So a canvass is essentially it's the culmination of all the data that's generated in an election cycle. And it's a process that allows election officials to confirm the accuracy of the data. I don't know if we can go to that next slide. And they're also supposed to be identifying, this is according to the EAC, identifying areas of improvement. One of the things that they do is they assess the eligibility of all the voters and all the ballots cast, and they reconcile that and make sure that there's a ballot and a voter and that number is the same. They aggregate and confirm the valid ballots cast and counted, and they go through the mail ones, uniform overseas voting, early voting, election day, provisional ballots. And they're supposed to examine the adherence to the procedures that are in place for that jurisdiction. And it varies wildly from state to state. States have jurisdiction over their own elections to some degree. And so, and then the audit. Some states do different types of audits, and you can find that a lot on the EAC website. They'll show audits for different states and what the requirements are. And one of the things that I picked up on when I read through this was that they really talked about what a thorough canvass looks like. And it's going beyond looking at the ballots. It's actually examining the work of the office staff and poll workers, completing chain of custody forms and reconciliation paperwork, and looking at the audit trail for all the ballots and equipment and supplies. And then they also recommend precinct voting wait time evaluation. So they recommend looking at your polling locations and finding out, are there certain locations where there were long wait lines, and to make sure that they correct that before the next election. So a canvass isn't really an audit. And here the difference is, and we'll go to that next slide. The canvass is focused on election documentation. And an audit is focused, at least the audits that are conducted in the United States, they're post-election tabulation audits. And so those audits are largely focused on the accuracy of the ballot tabulation. So the canvass is the part that Bennie is highly involved in his county, and as well as the audit. But those audits vary, and the canvass is pretty, it's somewhat standard from place to place. We sort of went over canvass in greater detail, so I'm going to talk about audits a little bit. And I'm not going to go too far into audits because that's a whole lifetime of shows just to get into that. But some states do risk limiting audits, and that's something that election officials perform those. And that kind of makes sure that the correct winner was the correct winner. But then there's also a ballot image and a cast vote record audit. And that's sort of a new thing that is gaining some traction and some legislation in different states. I know Arizona is trying to pass a ballot image and cast vote record to be open to the public. And so that's kind of an audit where the public can actually be, verifying. And sometimes they'll recount a portion of randomly selected ballots. In North Carolina, it's, two precincts per county. And I'm in Tennessee, what is it in Tennessee? You said it was 10% or?
Yeah, well, our larger counties, they elect to do a sample size, and our county picks around 10%.
Okay. Yeah, and there really aren't federal standards for election audits yet. There's best practices, and then there aren't really federal standards for election auditor credentialing. Right now, all of these audits are sort of these self-audits, and those could be perceived to be a conflict of interest and might result in a lower voter confidence result. There's not a lot of information online right now about sort of the future of audits. Will Adler, he's with the Center for Democracy and Technology, wrote a really great paper, and we'll put a link in the chat as well for that after the show, called "De-Weaponizing and Standardizing Post-Election Audits," and it's a really good read. So the next slide sort of looks at the timing of audits from state to state. And if you notice on this graphic that some of these audits occur after certification. And so that could actually be a problem, because if the correct winner, the unofficial results didn't match the official result or what they found in the audit afterwards, after certification, I don't know of any state where you can dial back and change.
After certification, there's really no redress, and there's in some counties and states, there's not even someone you can sue on behalf of trying to overturn the results.
Wow. Yeah, that's scary for a candidate to think that, so, I always like to give people an action to take. And so one of the actions I would suggest is, if your state is a state that doesn't audit until after certification, I would absolutely call your legislators or your whoever oversees elections in your state, and really push on them to require those audits prior to certification. We're going to show a very short video from the EAC that sort of talks about, what happens after that canvass and sort of who performs that. So we can go ahead and show that.
Other official signs the final election results report. Once signed, welcome to the final video of our 5-part series on election results, canvass, and certification. What happens after the canvass? In this video, we'll talk about certifying official election results. Once the canvass board has reviewed every precinct and every ballot has been accounted for, the results are checked one last time. All of the ballots cast in each precinct are compared one more time to the total number of voters in that precinct. This review process may be done by the canvass board or the chief election official for the jurisdiction. Once this review is complete, the chief election official, canvass board, or other official signs the final election results report. Once signed, these results are official. After the official results are signed at the local level, these results are sent to the state. Each state has its own process for certifying election results, but many have a state canvass board. The state canvass board reconciles the results of the election at the county level. Once these results are checked, the state canvass board, secretary of state, or other official will sign off on the results, and the statewide results for the election will be official. In addition to this process, most states audit their election results. This audit typically reviews a sample of ballots to verify that the final results of the election match the selected sample. This process can happen either before or after the official results are certified. Thank you for watching our series on election results, canvass, and certification. For more information about how elections work and how the EAC is helping America vote, check out www.eac.gov.
Yes, so who sort of talked a little bit about who certifies elections, And I wanted to give a little bit more detail about that because it's going to be different in every local jurisdiction and every state. And so you may, in your state, it might be a county board of election or canvass board or county clerk, municipal clerks. In Delaware, it's actually a superior court for the local certifying official. And like Benny's been a commissioner for Shelby County. And so he's been, asked in multiple elections to either certify or not certify an election. Do you have a board of canvass board? What are you guys called?
We do not. We have an auditing firm that on election night, they are observers of the election and they are looking surface level at what is taking place when the machines are sent out, when they come back, who's going in and out of rooms. And then they give us a report. The funny thing is they put a disclaimer at the beginning of the report to say this is not an audit. So that's all right. That's always been a rough. That's a blue pill. I can't swallow that one. So we have a lot of work to do here, but we have an auditing firm that does what. Okay. If you ask the voter here what a canvas is, they wouldn't have any idea.
But you guys do canvass the election. Is it an election? Are you an election commissioner? What is for the local Shelby County?
Yeah, the canvass should be conducted by, it's designated in the statutes that the commissioner or such persons it should delegate. And I think I'll probably read it out later.
Okay.
In the show, but because it's something that I use to determine whether or not I will certify election.
Right. Yeah, because, earlier we talked about that it is the election official attesting that the tabulation. So you really are, that signature means something.
Yeah, you put your name on the line. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then it goes to the state level, and in some states it is the Secretary of State. In Texas, it's the governor who would actually be the final authority to certify an election. North Carolina, we have a state board of elections. Some states have an election canvassing commission. And in Ohio, the General Assembly is the one who certifies. And so if we go to that next slide, I think you can see how politics can, play a role. And so what's happening right now, the controversy that people are seeing surrounding certification is that, before 2020, local election officials, it was pretty rare that they voted no to certify. And this ProPublica article talks about in 2022, actually they ended up getting removed in 2023, but two local election officials from Surrey County refused to certify the election for what the state deemed as political reasons and not a valid gripe that they had with, a procedure not being followed. They thought the law wasn't being followed, but the law is sort of in dispute right now. And so they decided not to certify, and a complaint was filed against them, and they were actually removed. So in 2022, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and New Mexico, there were all election officials in those states that did not certify. And some of them did admit to refusing to certify for political reasons. And sometimes elections had to be certified under court order. What's that, Benny?
That's pretty bold.
Yeah.
I do like how the EAC put it, that's one piece that they didn't highlight. But if you look at the graphic again, they showed like 2 people in blue and 2 people in red, because a lot of the certification process and the verification of the chain of custody should be done by bipartisan members of the certification team. So for a political statement to be made at certification is pretty wild.
Yeah, so I don't know. So there's some legislation that's being passed too. I'm concerned that certification might just become a rubber stamp if people are penalized for refusing to put their signature down for something legitimate, I do understand that some people might have political reasons and do it for that reason. And so this really is an issue that's going to be really on the forefront in our at least next few elections.
I would agree with that. Like, at its core, the first charge of an election commissioner, for me, is to promote the electoral process. So if there's distrust, there's a lack of transparency, there is, the consent of the governed is in an uproar, and 2020 was the year where it all the convergence of the distrust in the political process basically switched parties. But the outrage or the uproar prompted the public to demand of its officials to act in behalf of the interests of the public, and that's what you see happening. Even though it's political, one could argue my party is telling me something is wrong. They're preparing to sue. The last thing I want to do is put my signature on a document that will then be called into question in a court proceeding. So it's, we are under oath. And I say that all the time. I mostly have to get mad when I say it, but you have activists, you have people who, passion is not a substitute for skill. So you have people that are passionate about the electoral process, but then you have people who are in it and do it and have skin in the game. So the bar is a little bit higher for someone who has to do all of what you care about under oath.
Right. How many elections you've administered? I don't even know how many elections, and I understand
4 years worth. So
4 years worth. Yeah.
4 years worth of elections.
And you haven't always voted to certify the election.
No, matter of fact, I think I've only voted to certify maybe twice, or this is surprising to me because I vote no almost every certify. I vote no almost all the time, and yeah, I got reasons why I vote. We don't follow the law here, so if we don't complete the steps that, and I think we should probably do another show where we just put a pin in chain of custody, because those are my issues. We do not follow the chain of custody in Shelby County. And as a result, if we are not going to follow what the enumerated authority in the statutes tell us to do for determining the election results, then how can I possibly put my signature to say I'm willing to certify what I know we did not begin with correctly? And I'm just not going to do that.
Right. So one of the EAC's best practices is a chain of custody log. So
Yeah.
if I were to do a records request for Shelby County for their chain of custody log, what would I find?
I don't think you could get much, because I've asked for 4 years. I just completed my second term as a Shelby County election commissioner, and that's kind of the reason why I sought to go higher to the state level to help shape some of these local policies, because I don't see them being followed, and it's by political division. So, I'm never going to have the votes that I need to force this, because most of these bodies, they don't function like a professional board. They, like a homeowners association, really don't care. We're all residents, and there's really no downside or gain to the streets not being paved. But
Right.
when you're dealing with politics and power, and politics is a blood sport, so you have more underlying motivations for just the grandstanding and the posturing. I don't think that it's all the time someone is doing something, irregular or nefarious. It's just that's what you get into when you're dealing with things. When you politicize anything, is a problem. That's when it's on the way to the guillotine, when you politicize it. So
But you're not doing it for political reasons. You're doing it because you've identified areas that need improvement, and that they're maybe not following the procedures by not documenting the chain of custody.
Yeah. If we got our own Vanna White, if Kelly can put the 2 links. If you guys go to blackboxvoting.org, blackboxvoting.org is replete with articles that have gone at length to describe what these events are. These are processes that have significant flaws depending on which jurisdiction you go to, but it's so much nuance because each jurisdiction is governed by a different set of laws, and that's per state. So there's a link that's about chain of custody. It's a primer. It's a really good way of understanding what's the big deal about the chain of custody. And then there's another one that's chain of custody that gives some links, and I put both of those in the private chat. We can put them out there for the public. It is something I think you should all read because you'll see why this is one of the most important pieces of the election. It is literally the chain of every document and what happened. And Shelby County, we don't got a chain. We got like a bathtub. I don't know what to call it because I don't know what to call it because there are like technician reports. There are the seal odometers. And Lulu, I wish she was here for to chime in on this piece because when she started asking me what we do here and what she should ask for there, she got a wall. When she started asking and trying to call out some of the things that I would tell her to ask for, the naming is different depending on where you are, but the process is still the same. And she would ask for things and they would just outright deny her for those things that when she go and look at the statutes for state laws, they say you should be allowed these things. And John Brakey is somebody who puts it to the limit. When I learned a lot from John when we went to Florida, and like this guy popped out a camera and was like filming the tabulation of results. You go to jail. Justin Timberlake was here in Memphis. He came, he's from Millington. He comes back home to vote, takes a picture, and he got slapped on the wrist, but he's a celebrity. But it's against the law to do that here. But you could film it. It's actually against the law to say you can't do it in Florida. So it's the variations of how the law is applied is wide reaching, and the range is really, really significant. So you have to look at those statutes to see. But I vote no all the time because we don't have a chain of custody. And if I ask a question that I don't have a comfort level with it, my signature ain't going on it.
So as an advocate, we do submit records requests and we are denied quite a bit of the time. But as an election commissioner, you've asked for things, and have you been denied seeing certain things?
Oh yeah, I almost threatened to hire a lawyer to sue for what I would deem as public records, and the administrative election, and the audio is recorded. That's what's so fascinating to me. Like the political divisions really trump everything when you get to the nut and bolts of it as an official, because I would ask for documents, and the response from the administrative elections, well, that's not a public record. It's like, so I'm not a public person. I'm the oversight.
You're the person
I'm the person that's charged with the oversight of this. I don't really care that it's not a public document.
Right.
But I knew that it was. So even to be denied basic documents that the public should have right. If you're gonna tell the commissioner no, good luck for the public getting it.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of look to our board or our commissioners to vouch, they're putting their signature on this. And so the assumption, I think, from the public's end is that they've dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's, and they've looked at everything on our behalf.
Yeah. I'll give a more concrete. You want me to give an example now?
Sure. Yeah.
I have more concrete. There was an election. I voted not the certified election. It was one of the first elections when I right before I met you in Berkeley. It was our mayor's election, and it was October in 2019. And on election night, I'm watching the tabulation of the results, and a lot of people don't know that I did fraction magic before getting on the board, so I knew everything about the process. And it's abnormal to have a commissioner that's very versed on the subject, because most of these are appointed positions or elected positions where you don't have to have a lot of knowledge. You just have some political friends that are willing to appoint you to the board, or a political aspirations that put you on it. But basically, this air gap concept of not letting the computer that's tabulating the results connect to the computer that is transmitting it out to the public, that's considered air gap. So our one of the administrators or one of the election workers took a thumb drive and he placed the thumb drive into the tabulator, and that was to copy the records, the tabulated results at the point of time for him copying it. He or she is copying it, and then take that to a computer that is connected to the internet, and then publish that file so that the news media and the other individuals in the election commission can see the results. After that, took out a set of pliers and tore the thumb drive up. Y'all, I went berserk when I saw that. I was like, what is this guy? What are they doing? Like, you got some pliers and you've destroyed the thumb drive that you just used to transfer the results. And I went ballistic, y'all. I was like, we can go to Target. I'm just gonna buy a whole bunch, and y'all gonna set this in a box when y'all finish. This is a violation of the chain of custody. And you would have thought that I deer in headlights. Like, they were looking like, what's this guy talking about? Like he must be you disrupting an election. We got an election to run. I was like, no, you don't. Not we. That's like, and I gave the example in the following, the subsequent election commission meeting, because I voted not to certify. I said, man, I watch you take a pair of pliers to about 20 thumb drives and destroy them. That is a violation of the federal records retention statute. But more importantly, it violates the chain of custody. And this wasn't it, but I did it for the sake of making a point. I said, so you telling me that if I went and this is a thumb drive that I had soldered back together for some stuff that I was doing with finance, but it was serving the point that when a thumb drive is broken, it's not dead. If you don't break it good enough, you can solder it back together. So I held this up in an election commission meeting. I said, if I go and look at the contents of this drive, am I gonna like what I see on here? Am I gonna see more than what I should see in the election? And it was like pandemonium. I kind of embarrassed them, but I was trying to make the point. Like, you don't get to tell the commissioner who understands the statutes that I don't know what I'm talking about on election night. And for that reason, because we destroyed and we didn't do that ever again after that. So that I must have made the point clear. I was like, that is a violation of the chain of custody. We cannot do that. And for that reason, I can't even know if those thumb drives were infected. I don't know what the chain was on it. I don't know who certified that they were clean. I don't know how those thumb drives got into your hand. I don't know how they got, who validated that they should go in the machines. And when you took them out, you destroyed them. So I don't know what's on it. I said, that's the equivalent of taking somebody that was shot, putting them in an ambulance, take them to the hospital and burn up the ambulance. Right? Like, you can't do that. You just cannot do that. And it was not received very well at all when I brought it across. But the more we had this bumping of heads with me enforcing the statutes, that's when we got more compliance from the administrator's office.
Yeah, but I mean,
but I voted no.
Yeah,
I voted
and you're really having to put yourself out there to just do the right thing. Yeah,
I sound like a troublemaker that's trying to be smarter than I really am. And I'm like, no, I'm actually trying to fulfill the oath that I was sworn to follow. I'm breaking the law if I allow this to happen and I see something and don't say anything. So it's not my fault that you don't know what you should be doing as the Tennessee code says you should do it. That's your problem.
Right. And it puts election commissioners in a really hard spot because you're being asked to attest to this, and what you saw wasn't part of what should happen. And so, there's no real mechanism for that. And so
I'm glad you said that. Here's why. Here's why, right? So I can talk about this. I just took a deposition this morning. The election commission is being sued. I'm not even election commissioner no more, y'all. I'm still being sued in my official capacity over records that will show up in the meeting minutes, that will show up in the procedural parts of elections when they're challenged. The public doesn't get sued for this stuff. The staff doesn't get sued for this stuff. When there is a lawsuit, the election commissioners are sued for it. because we were supposed to provide the oversight that was necessary to attest, like you say, that the results are in kind and in keeping with the statutes. So I'm not trying to get in. I'm sick of being sued, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that I avoid that, because I don't want to show up in court and have to raise my hand to say that I did something or didn't do something. You know, you do it by omission or commission. Like I didn't omit to call this out. So that's the sticking point for me. I'm the one that's going to get sued. So I'm not trying to get sued. So we got to follow the law, guys.
Yeah.
We on the oath to do it anyway. Let's just follow the law.
Right. So I did see a question in the chat from Bruce Korb asking, when is it okay for a certifying authority to say no? That's an interesting question, and one that right now there are some laws being passed, and I can tell you about a few of them. One is in Colorado. Legislators have passed this Election Security Act, which mandates that the Secretary of State certify the county's results if it misses a deadline to do so. So if the local board hems and haws and doesn't want to certify, then the Secretary of State can just go ahead and do that.
Yeah, that's an awkward way to close the loop.
Yeah, and then in Michigan, it says voters passed a wide-ranging voter protection ballot proposal in November that made certification, quote, a ministerial, clerical, and non-discretionary duty. So essentially, Michigan is making it a rubber stamp, just a ceremonial.
Yeah, if it's a ministerial embody, it come through, and that's actually what I'm being sued in my official capacity as a former commissioner now, because what we did in that circumstance, where we were just a ministerial embodied. We weren't charged to do anything, and we didn't have a duty to attest. When you sign this is a true statement, we have to take a candidate or a voter at their word, and the more you make that a ministerial embody, the less there is a reason to act.
That's true. And then in New Mexico law requires that commissioners approve election results unless they can point to a specific problem, like you pointed to.
I mean, I can see that. If there are things that are alleged and there is at least one affidavit, then you got a hard time getting me to say yes. Like, but I do have to have something that's material. Mm-hmm. I'm not just gonna say, well, I'm just gonna be out here, because there's 2 times that I voted. I think 2 elections I did vote to certify. It's been about 15 elections I voted no 80 and 90% of the time. But there were 2 that I did, and it was because I voted no so much that on one of these really contested elections, it was the last one that I voted yes on, was the one that was significant. We had 90 something seats on the ballot. There was judges. These like 8-year terms. And I was like, y'all, if we're not going to compare these tapes, or y'all not going to give me something that I can look at and quell some of the fears, there will be a litany of lawsuits. And I'm going to make it relevant, because I'm going to tell you I'm not willing to certify this. And they made the accommodations necessary for me to come in. And I was able to do a sampling, even though that wasn't the full extent of the law. But our law gives the latitude for us to delegate some of that authority. So I felt a little bit more comfortable certifying that election, even if there were some errors. There weren't any in the ones that I spot checked, and the administrator assured me that the process was, because you get like 3 weeks to certify. Use the time. Use the time.
Yeah, and it varies state to state. Certification requirements are between 1 and 30 days, depending on the state you're in. So, 1 day, that's intense.
Yeah, ain't nothing. You still unofficial. How you can count all you just count the provisions. That's it. You can be up to 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right. One of the things that has been sort of an ongoing saga with me, I'm sure you know all about it, is that our election officials in Wake County, which is the county where I live, they actually don't all go on election night to the Board of Elections to oversee those thumb drives being loaded, which is our law saying that all election officials have to be present for every part of the canvass, because the canvass is the whole process.
Wow.
And so they have to be present for that whole process. And I was a political observer in 2020 for the primary, and I thought, I'm just going to go see what's going on at the board
Check it out.
of elections. And they told me to leave, or they'd arrest, leave, you can't be here, we'll call the police kind of threat. And so I found out, though, that there was a quorum of board members present. But now they only have one Republican and one Democrat, not the whole 5 board there. And so this past year, I wrote an article for Who, What, Why. I wrote an opinion piece called Just Trust, Don't Verify, a recipe for electoral disaster. And it really talks about sort of how, if we end up going to sort of a rubber stamping system, that's actually going to erode confidence in elections further. And so, our elections officials need to be there on election night. And so in order to sort of push that, John Brakey and I went down to the Board of Elections to find a place to protest, nearby, to just point out that they're not following the law, because they do certify elections. Yeah. And then
that's the end of your troublemaker.
I got trespassed, and the lawsuit is now settled. So
Did you get a mugshot?
What's that? No.
Did you get a mugshot?
No, that's the actual thing, is that the police, he was like, I can't really, there's nothing to charge you with. You're not even on their property.
Yeah, that's political. Yeah,
it's political. Yeah, I mean, the police officer said that it looked like I was being blackballed and that I should file a complaint. Yeah. Which I ended up doing in federal court, because they took my right to observe for almost a year away. Yeah. So, this idea that election officials are present and really looking at things is really near and dear to my heart, because I can't go into that back room and look at things, but election commissioners can. And we're sort of looking at them to vouch for this. And it's sort of appalling to learn that even you are denied access to information that you are vouching for.
Look, I got a better one. It's slightly off topic, but just to show you the political distribution when you're in the politics of the electoral process. When we were fighting for paper ballots here, hand-marked paper ballots, got to say the hand-mark, during the procurement process, I had to sign a non-disclosure. I was given a non-disclosure to look at the pricing information for the equipment that I was going to have to vote on. And they were saying, basically, you don't need to see the pricing information. That shouldn't be available to you. And you should just vote on the vendor based on a presentation and not look at any cost, any cost information. And I kept fighting it. And when they knew that they were going to have to give it to me, they gave me a non-disclosure. What they didn't know is that I understand how government works. So I emailed the purchasing office and I said, I'm a commissioner. I'm on the oversight body. I need a copy of the vendor reports, and I need the cost information separated. I had all of that with no NDA in the same day.
Wow.
Yeah. So there is the politics gets in the way of doing what is our professional political fiduciary responsibilities. Yeah.
And I hear that you're moving on up to the state board.
Yay. Our coordinator of elections was appointed to something significant on the EAC.
Okay.
It's gonna be a thankless road up there. I don't know what to say about my fellow commissioners there. Hopefully they receive me, but I don't think I'm going to be very popular up there.
But it sounds like you're going to do the right thing, and you'll have more authority to what you'll have more authority to do. What, like, what do you?
Yeah, I will represent West Tennessee. So on the Shelby County Election Commission, I represented one of 5 members on the local commission. Now, as a state election commissioner, I'm the oversight portion for West Tennessee. So the administrator and the chairman of the election commission, we're not equals anymore. So there is some significant more there's more authority to most of the times when I would ask for these documents, they would say, well, the state said we don't have to give them to you.
Hmm.
Well, now I'm the state. Let's see.
Okay. That's awesome. I'm very happy for people in Tennessee that they're going to have more trustworthy elections now that you're.
Yeah, I'm gonna be shocked. I'm probably gonna get more responses from Republicans than Democrats, even though I'm going to be a Democrat political appointee, because right now it's their time. They are distrustful in a way that they feel disserviced by the institution of elections because they cannot validate or do not have enough what they would consider evidence that the candidate of their choice lost the election fair and square. And it's not my position to advocate whether or not that's true. It's to say that I can see that without transparency, we say this in Six Sigma, in the absence of clarity, people make stuff up. So I'm going to try to be the clarity that's needed so that we don't have so much stuff that's being made up.
Yeah.
Because they don't have anywhere to go. And if you go to these officials and they just posture and say, well, yeah, we do everything right here. There is a not only do we have a person that's functioning in the EAC for Tennessee, but Tennessee released something a couple of months ago that said we are ranked #1 in election security. And I just have to find the time to figure out how in God's name that can be when I reside in Shelby County, when I know things are not up and up here.
I see Jan Bendor has a comment about rubber stamping, that it's supposedly going to protect elections from the GOP efforts to insert partisan into the certification process. But it absolutely
won't. That's not how that works.
What do you think? What do you think will happen if?
Cut up, Jan. What's going to happen is what's happening right now. So this is something that me and Lynn have always talked about. So it's something that Lynn said. I don't want to steal the thunder, but it just came up for me. So I'm gonna put it out there, and you can take it as an overhand or underhand pitch. These statutes have been in the books for hundreds of years, and because the current set of electorate is distrustful of the process, they are looking at the enumerated authorities that are coming from these statutes, and they are acting and they're using that authority that has been given to them from the statutes. It looks like they are doing something that they don't have authority to do. They have the authority, they just haven't been using it. And to do that in some of these areas where you have these, they rural areas, right? So what, you gonna send some Democrats down there? You're not gonna be able to do it, right? So that it shouldn't be partisan at all. And what you have is enough individuals who are getting involved and they are policing their republic. And that is in some instances an overreaction to a very significant problem that has largely, and this is the disappointing part, largely been advocated by Democrats before 2020. It's a shame.
Yeah. I mean, it really has. It really has swung. I mean, before 2020, any sort of election information was generally put out by either blackboxvoting.org.
Black Box #1. Or
Black Box Voting, universities. And so, we could sort of count on that information being true and accurate because there was no hidden agenda. But you're right, it was mostly put out by Democrats. And now that there have been some people who have been trying to legitimately, they have been trying to cause harm to our elections. Not all of them. I don't think we can group the GOP into one group, because I've seen all those slices of people who, they're going to their authority who they believe, and they're being told incorrect information. And so, a lot of these people have been duped. And it's really unfortunate that the Democrats didn't step up and, like you said, give the information, because in the absence of that information, people will make stuff up.
Yeah, look, Marilyn Marks, Jan Bendor, John Brakey, Alex Haldeman, Rich DeMillo, the Princeton professor, I can't think of his name right now.
Andrew Appel.
Andrew Appel. These were all the names that were cited. This is the top of the food chain. I can't think of the other guy's name. But all of these individuals were the voices of reason. Blackboxvoting.org is hacking democracy. You're going to look at the Hursty hack. You're going to look at all these places. This kill chain was still the same producers from hacking democracy. So there was a lot of interest, and it just kind of waned away. And I just don't understand that. And I always say that, I didn't do anything different when the tide changed. I just kept telling them the same thing that I was telling everyone else who was had a distrust for the results.
Yeah, I mean, recently there was an EAC commissioner who was in some hot water because he went to a Republican group to give a talk. And I didn't hear the talk, but I imagine that what he said was true, that he went and essentially told them what the EAC was doing and what improvements needed to be made, and sort of gave the same talk to that Republican group that he would give to any group. And so, for somebody to be, thrown under the bus for giving accurate information to a different political party, it really does make it hard to get the truth out there.
Yeah, it does. I spoke at a Tennessee Stands as a Republican group. I think it's nonpartisan, but it's the guy's a Republican. I know he's a Republican, and he's got a pretty good organization. And I went to speak there. The Associated Press came in there. They did a hit job on that. But the reporter, the Associated Press reporter, I had to tell her, I was like, look, ma'am, I got another 30 hours in me. Like there's not a lot that you're going to get from me that says I'm a sympathizer. I'm an advocate. I'm not a sympathizer. I'm an advocate. These issues are real. Mm-hmm. But in the absence of clarity, you do have a lot of stuff that you can't lean on. So that's why you need these organizations to kind of step up. Even Black Box, and I'm biased for Black Box, but that's where we need to start directing people to these organizations who are on the ground and looking at what is happening and explaining, like what we're doing now, the chain of custody and the certification process, so that people can know. They don't know.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I see a comment from John Brakey about, that Maricopa, I think people are calling it a fraudit now. People sort of gave him a hard time for going. Man. And I actually felt better that he was there, because I knew he was going to be an objective observer and wouldn't be afraid to say what he saw.
Right. Shout out to John Brakey. Spoiler alert, I'm on the board, and you are too, of Audit USA. But I remember when John called me, right? I was outraged when I saw it was Keith Olbermann. He's calling John a racist. John, I got my goatee right now too. He was calling John a racist and Bamboo Brakey, and they were saying the guy was a Republican. I was like, are you guys high? Like, y'all talking about John? No. And I was like, John, I'm getting on a plane. I'm coming down there. You need some reinforcement. Yeah. Let me come down there and give you some support, my guy. Because they are really just posturing for the politics, and it seems unconscionable that a Democrat could be standing in an Arizona audit that's led by Republicans. But that's what we need. That's what we need.
Yeah. I do think that that's true. If people aren't willing to step up and say, hey, here's where our elections are running well, and here's where they are secure, and here's where we can actually make improvements, I think you gain the public's trust that way. Whereas if you just stand up there behind a podium and say, trust us, we audited our election, well, we now know those are self audits, which wouldn't fly in any other industry, really. But there is something to be said for election officials conducting that audit, because elections are complicated and they're not as easy as people think. And elections officials are the people who understand the elections more than anyone else. And so, that paper that I mentioned that Will Adler wrote, he talks about the need for independent auditors. And, John Brakey talks about public verification for ballot images and cast vote records. And I think all those things are going to lead to more confidence. But now there's going to be this battle of who does the audit. And, is it going to be that, the cyber ninjas get credentialing to go in? Should there be credentialing and all that because I think it really does touch on the certification issue. I'm not an election commissioner, but if I were and I didn't,
but you're
and
a
I
rocket
saw
scientist.
things, I wouldn't put my signature on something that I wasn't sure about if I was seeing things or people weren't giving me all the information. So I don't know. I think that everyone who is involved in elections and understands elections, we can't be afraid to go talk to everyone, believers, non-believers, people who, people who you may not agree with politically. I think it is never wrong to give people correct information.
I learned that from Bev. Shout out to Bev Harris. I learned that was my mentor. She's still the GOAT to me. She would say, tell everybody who would listen, Benny. And she would go to Alex Jones. She went everywhere. And John did it too. And they were out there telling everyone who would listen, this is how these things work. There are problems. There are solutions. Mm-hmm. And that has largely, there's a vacuum that needs to be filled now, because right now everybody is retreated to their corners. I think like election commission should be independent boards. Like you have to do something to remove the politics where you just have people that's under oath and saying, look, these are the rules that we can all agree that we have to play by. Almost, it's got to be like the UFC.
Right.
Like, these are the rules. This is a legal hit. This right.
Right.
There's gonna be some blood in the end, but they hug at the end, right? So,
but that's true that people know the rules, and the EAC, they talk about in best practices that when the public shows up for the canvass, that they're given the procedures for the canvass, and so they could really just sit there with that sheet and just check off, oh, okay, they did this, and I see them doing that, and I see them doing that. And the problem is that in many places, those procedures either don't exist or they're not shared publicly. I don't know. Do you guys have a really strict?
No, put the comment up by Frank Henry, because he's got the point. Like I've had to do a lot of this Six Sigma stuff in like for FedEx and ABB, because I worked at these large corporations where in order to get these products, because they're competing, right? In government, you don't have to compete. They don't like what's happening. They just raise your taxes. But in corporations, they have to compete. So they have all of these process improvement methodologies that they're applying. And he's got it totally right, because there's concepts like five whys and the 4S and the 5S techniques that when you're just looking at sorting ballots and moving ballots through the chain and documenting the chain, the government could really benefit from some of these techniques, but they just don't have the appetite for it. I mean, it's government, so they're not running on the resources. I think every time I go into a government institution, it's probably like 20 years behind what's actually happening in the real world. Because I don't know, maybe they just don't use the funds right, or they're not getting the right consultants. But there's a big gap, and Frank is calling it out. It is good. It's a good look. I ain't thinking we're gonna do that, Frank. But it would be great if we did.
Yeah, there is some movement to get people to do these audits and canvassing who have a little bit more experience. I wrote this down earlier. I'm going to try to find it. In New Jersey, the state attorney general appoints an audit team, and it has to include at least one member with verifiable expertise in the field of statistics and another with, quote, verifiable expertise in the field of auditing. And in New Mexico, the Secretary of State is required to contract with an auditor qualified by the state auditor to audit state agencies. So getting
rolls up into
people to
political.
audit who actually
Yeah.
have auditing experience, I think, is where the future of that is going.
Yeah, for sure.
I hope it gets there before before other stuff
You're gonna
happens.
be before 2024.
I hope so.
Thanks for coming.
We probably should talk about
Smart election. I'm doing it now. We're
Yeah,
at the 1 hour mark. We are Smart Elections. We survive off your donations. If you go to smartelections.us, on the tab next to the home, there's a donate button, and give us all your money and tell Lulu that we sent you there. She'll be appreciative. There's a lot of work that goes into to producing this information. We don't make any money, but there's a lot of effort and work that comes in where we're seeking out the best and brightest in the field so that we can get the message out, distill it down, reach some synthesis where you have the best and brightest minds. I'm not one of those, but you got some of the best and brightest minds that are looking at elections, and we're bringing that information and talking about it in a way that gives our listeners the ability to kind of ask questions and probe around and figure out how this stuff works.
Yeah, I mean, I love what Smart Elections does. I've learned so much from these monthly and twice a month forums that you and Lulu normally do, and I'm grateful to Lulu for trusting me with her show. And I hope that everyone learned some stuff that they can take with them. And please don't be one of the people with the bystander effect. When you look around, there's probably not those people standing around. They probably aren't looking into their local elections. And so it is a little lonely, but the more we get involved, the more of us there are going to be. And I think, the more information we're going to get, and hopefully that's going to build more trustworthy elections.
Yeah. Elections need more problem solvers, less complainers. So the passion is not a substitute for skill. Read some of these articles. Blackboxvoting.org has got a bunch of them. Audit USA has a bunch of them. Smart Elections. Go to the advisors page for Smart Elections. You can see like a row of PhDs and my little self in that mix. But Lulu's Smart Elections has done a lot to make sure that we're giving very good information. And I guess that's going to do it for us. Do you remember what our tagline is when we finish? You have to take us out. You're the host. You don't know?
You have to go ahead. I don't.
I'll do it. Okay, I'll do it. This is what democracy looks like.